Thank you for pressing play. Your presence here brings joy to my heart. Hello, dear viewers. Get ready to expand your horizons as we delve into Ichthyovenator. Ichthyovenator is a genus of spinosaurid dinosaur that lived in what is now Laos sometime between 120 and 113 million years ago during the Aptian stage of the Early Cretaceous period. It is known from fossils collected from the Grès supérieurs formation of the Savannakhet Basin, the first of which were found in 2010, consisting of a partial skeleton without the skull or limbs. This specimen became the holotype of the new genus and species Ichthyovenator laosensis, and was described by palaeontologist Ronan Allain and colleagues in 2012. The generic name, meaning fish hunter, refers to its assumed piscivorous lifestyle, while the specific name alludes to the country of Laos. In 2014, it was announced that more remains from the dig site had been recovered. These fossils included teeth, more vertebrae backbones, and a pubic bone from the same individual. The holotype specimen is estimated to have been between 8.5 to 10.5 meters long and to have weighed 2.40. Ichthyovenator's teeth were straight and conical, and its neck resembled that of the closely related genus Sigilnosaurus, which may be synonymous with Spinosaurus. Like others in its family, Ichthyovenator had tall neural spines that formed a sail on its back. Unlike other known spinosaurids, Ichthyovenator's sail had a sinusoidal wave-like shape that curved downwards over the hips and divided into two separate sails. The pelvic girdle was reduced. The ilium, uppermost body of the pelvis, was proportionately longer than both the pubis and ischium than in other known theropod dinosaurs. Ichthyovenator was initially thought to belong to the subfamily Berenichina, but more recent analyses place it as a primitive member of the Spinosaurina. As a spinosaur, Ichthyovenator would have had a long, shallow snout and robust forelimbs. Its diet likely mainly consisted of aquatic prey, hence its etymology. Spinosaurids are also known to have eaten small dinosaurs and pterosaurs in addition to fish. Ichthyovenator's conspicuous sail might have been used for sexual display or species recognition. Fossil evidence suggests spinosaurids, especially spinosaurines, were adapted for semi-aquatic lifestyles. The vertebral spines of Ichthyovenator's tail were unusually tall, suggesting as in today's crocodilian's tail may have aided in swimming. Ichthyovenator lived alongside sauropod and ornithopod dinosaurs, as well as bivalves, fish and turtles. As we progress, let's zoom in on discovery and naming and examine its role in shaping our overall narrative. Alt-drawing of fossil neck, ribs, backbones, pelvis and tail bones superimposed on silhouette of a dinosaur, with a silhouette of a human on the left. Thumbprint skeletal diagram with holotype fossils in white and undescribed material in red. The first fossils of Ichthyovenator were found in 2010 at Ban Kalam in the Grès supérieurs formation of the Savannakhet Basin in Savannakhet Province, Laos. These fossilized bones were recovered from a red sandstone layer within a surface area of less than 2. Designated under the specimen numbers MDS1 to 15, they consist of a partly articulated, well-preserved skeleton lacking the skull and limbs, and including the third to last dorsal back vertebra, the neural spine of the last dorsal vertebra, 5 partial sacral hip vertebrae, the first 2 caudal tail vertebrae, both ilia main hip bones, a right pubis pubic bone, both ischia lower and ramus hip bones, and a posterior dorsal rib. The 12th dorsal spine is bent sideways when viewed front to back due to taphonomic distortion. The centrovertebral bodies of the sacrals are largely incomplete due to erosion, but preserved all of their accompanying spines with their upper edges intact. At the time of Ichthyovenator's description, excavations at the site were still ongoing. After undergoing preparation in 2011, the skeleton was used as the basis, or holotype, for the type species Ichthyovenator laosensis, which was named and described in 2012 by palaeontologists Ronan Allain, Shenkum Eisenvong, Felipe Richer, and Bouncer Kintavong. The generic name is derived from the Old Greek word ichthys, fish, and the Latin word venator, hunter, in reference to its likely piscivorous fish-eating lifestyle. The specific name refers to its provenance from Laos. Ichthyovenator is the third named spinosaurid dinosaur from Asia after the Thai genus Spinosaurid in 1986 and the Chinese species Xenopiosaurus fusiensis in 2009. The latter may represent the same animal as Spinosaurid. In 2014, Allain published a conference paper on Ichthyovenator. The abstract indicated additional remains from the original individual had been found after excavations continued in 2012. These remains include 3 teeth, the left pubis, and many vertebrae, including a nearly complete neck, the first dorsal vertebra, and 7 more caudal vertebrae. Some of these additional vertebrae were compared with those of other spinosaurids in a 2015 paper by German palaeontologist Sergio Evers and colleagues, in which they noted similarities with the vertebrae of the African spinosaurid Sigilmosasaurus. The spotlight now falls on description as we delve deeper into its details. Thumb upright osteohylatus of 6 spinosaurid dinosaurs compared with that of a human. Ichthyovenator second from right size of various spinosaurids. Ichthyovenator in turquoise, first from right compared with the human left. In 2016, Gregory South, Paul estimated Ichthyovenator to have been approximately 8.5 meters long and to have weighed 2t the same year. Ruben Molina Perez and Asia Laramendi gave an estimate of 10.5 meters in length, 2.95 meters tall at the hips, and 2.40 in weight. Ichthyovenator's teeth were conical, straight, and bore no serrations. The front edges of the maxillary and dentary teeth were evident on the base of the tooth crown. The front articulating surfaces of Ichthyovenator's rear cervical and front dorsal vertebrae were 1.5 times wider than they were high and wider than the length of their centra. They also bore robust front tubercles processes for skeletal muscle attachment and lacked interzygapophyseal lamina bony plates, which resulted in their spinipary and spinopostygapophyseal fossa depressions having open undersides. The first dorsal vertebra had extensive transverse processes wing-like projections that articulate with the ribs, as well as deep excavations at the front and back of its base that were filled by air sacs in life. The parapophyse processes that articulated with the capitulum of the ribs increased in height from the rear cervicals to the first dorsal. Its underside remained in contact with the front lower edge of the centrum. This is unlike the condition in most theropods, in which the parapophyse shifted towards the top of the vertebra during the transition from cervical to dorsal vertebrae. All of these features were also present in Sigilmosasaurus. Ichthyovenator's mid-cervical vertebrae had elongate, somewhat wider than tall centra that became progressively shorter towards the rear of the neck, as well as well-developed keels on their bottom surfaces, traits that were shared with the spinosaurids Baryonyx, Suchomimus, Sigilmosasaurus, and Valobenovenatrix. The cervical neural spines of Ichthyovenator were taller than in Sigilmosasaurus and Baryonyx but shared the blade-like shape with those 2 taxa at the mid-cervicals. The holotype dorsal rib, which was found near the 12th dorsal vertebra, had a head typical of the ribs of other moderate to large-sized theropods. The rib shaft formed a half circle. The rib's lower end was slightly expanded both sideways and to the front and back. This condition, which differs from the tapered, pointed tips seen in the ribs of other theropods, suggests the rhiamus dorsal ribs articulated with the complex of the sternum breastbone. Like many other spinosaurids, Ichthyovenator had a sail on its back and hips that was formed by the elongated neural spines of its vertebrae. Uniquely among known members of the family, Ichthyovenator's sail was divided into over the hips and had a sinusoid wave-like curvature. This is in contrast to the related genus Spinosaurus and Suchomimus, both of which had continuous sails that rose to a peak before sloping down again, and Baryonyx, which showed a less developed sail, having much lower dorsal spines. Ichthyovenator's preserved dorsal and sacral spinal column, which is overlong, shows a very high spine on the 12th dorsal vertebra representing a crest that rose from the back and a lower rounded sail that extended from the sacral vertebrae of the hips. The latter sail's apex was located above the 3rd and 4th sacrals. The high spine of the 12th dorsal vertebra widened towards the top, giving it a trapezoidal shape similar to the condition seen in a neural spine from Valibinovenatrix, whereas the spines of other known spinosaurids were roughly rectangular. It also lacked the forward or backward inclination of Spinosaurus neural spines. Its front corner formed a narrow process, pointing upwards. The spine of the 13th dorsal vertebra has been only partly preserved. Its upper and lower ends had broken off from taphonomic causes. From its general shape, the describers inferred, however, it was about as long as the preceding spine. This would imply the back edge of the front sail would form a rectangular corner, because the spine of the much lower first sacral vertebra is about, creating a sudden hiatus in the sail's profile. The spine of the second sacral vertebra steeply curved upwards again, joining the and high, broad, fan-shaped spines of the third and fourth sacrals. The tall spine of the fifth sacral gradually descended. Unlike in the sails of most other theropods, including that of Suchomimus, the sacral spines were not fused and had no extensive contacts. The second and third sacral centra were fused. The suture connecting them was still visible. Only the ramus 2 dorsal vertebrae are preserved, so to what extent the dorsal sail continued towards the front of the animal's back is unknown. The sacral sail was continued by the spines of the first 2 caudal vertebrae, which were and tall respectively. They leaned backwards at 30 degrees and had smooth front and rear edges. The centra of the first 2 caudals were much broader than long and amphicolaus deeply concave on both ends. The caudal transverse processes were prominent and sturdy and were angled upwards towards the rear of the vertebrae. The transverse processes of the first caudal vertebra, when seen from above, had a sigmoid or S-shaped profile. The prespinal and postspinal fossa bony depressions in front and behind the neural spines were confined to a position above the base of the neural spines. The sides of the first caudal were also deeply hollowed out between the presdiapophyse articular surfaces of the preceding vertebra and the diapophyse processes on the sides for rib articulation, a condition that is not observed in other theropods. Some of the caudal vertebrae also had unusually tall, forwardly extended presdiapophyse. The long ilium of the pelvis was blade-like, and longer in proportion to the long pubic bone than that of any other known large theropod. The poststibular ala rear expansion was much longer than the prestibular ala front expansion, which had a shelf on its central surface that formed the middle edge of the prestibular fossa. Viewed distally towards the center of attachment, the lower end of the pubis had an L shape resembling that of Baryonyx. The pubic apparent expanded lower end of the pubis had a large pubic foramen. On the hind rim of the pubic bone, 2 openings obturator foramen and a lower venstra opening are open and notch-like. The ischium was long, making it shorter in relation to the pubis than in all other known tetanurans theropods. The ischium's main body was large and extensive, typical of the Y-shaped upper ischia of other tetanurans, and bore an oval-shaped obturator foramen in its side. The shaft of the ischium was flattened sideways and had an unexpanded ischiadic apron, as in Monolophosaurus and Synraptor. The ischium attached to the ilium via a peg and socket-like articulation, unlike the flat, concave condition seen in Baryonyx. This feature was also present in Valibinovenatrix. Now, let's shift our perspective and explore classification from a different angle. From the fabrical 3 pairs of illustrated fossil pelvic bones and spinal columns compared to the silhouette of a human to their left, Ichthyovenator's pelvis and vertebrae first from the bottom comparison of the pelvic region and neural spine sails of Suchomimus, Spinosaurus, and Ichthyovenator. In 2012, Ichthyovenator's describers established the unique derived traits of the genus, its dorsal and sacral sinusoidal sail, the 13th dorsal neural spine being 410% the length of the centrum, and its distinct finger-shaped process on its front upper corner, the broad, expanded tips of the third and fourth sacral spines, the first caudal vertebra's deep presdiapophyseal and centrodiapophyseal fossa and S-shaped transverse processes in top view, and the higher ratio of length between the ilium and the accompanying pubis than in any other known theropod. Allain and colleagues also identified some anatomical features that are unique among other known tetanurans theropods, including the rhamous dorsal ribs articulating with the sternal complex, the pubis's main body having obturator and pubic openings, and the ischium having a foramen on its upper end and a shaft that was flattened sideways. The shrinkage of the pubis and ischium relative to the pelvis has been observed in basalcorasaurs and allusauroids, which the describers attributed to mosaic evolution, the evolution of certain anatomical traits at different times in separate species. Allain and his team considered Ichthyovenator as representing the first unequivocal spinosaurid from Asia. Though prior spinosaurids had been named from the continent, including Siamosaurus from Thailand's Barremian Salkyor Formation and Sinopiosaurus fuchiensis from China's Aptian Xenong Formation, authors noted that palaeontologists have debated the validity of these taxa because they are only confidently known from isolated teeth. Brazilian paleontologists Marcus Sales and Cesar Schultz have suggested these teeth may eventually be attributed to spinosaurids similar to Ichthyovenator. In addition to tooth fossils, a spinosaurid skeleton that possibly belongs to Siamosaurus was excavated from the Tychochorot Formation in 2004 and was identified as a definite spinosaur in a 2008 conference abstract by Angela Milner and colleagues, 8 years prior to Ichthyovenator's description. In 2012, Allain and colleagues assigned Ichthyovenator to the Spinosauridae, more precisely to the subfamily Berryonychina in a basal position as the sister taxon of a clade formed by Beryonyx and Suchomonas. In Allain's 2014 abstract, he found Ichthyovenator instead as belonging to the Spinosaurina due to the lack of serrations on its teeth and the similarities of its vertebrae to those of Sigilmosasaurus. In a 2015 phylogenetic analysis by Evers and colleagues, they suggested the apparent presence of both Beryonychine and Spinosaurin characteristics in Ichthyovenator means the distinction between the two subfamilies may not be as clear as previously thought. In 2017, American paleontologist Mickey Mortimer informally hypothesized Ichthyovenator may have been a sail-backed carcharodontisaurid dinosaur closely related to Conchovenator, rather than a spinosaurid. Mortimer considered Ichthyovenator as Insectocidis of uncertain taxonomic affinity within the clade Oreonides, pending description of the new material, which he states will likely confirm Ichthyovenator's spinosaurid identity. However, he no longer has this identification on his website. A 2017 analysis by Sales and Schultz questioned Beryonychina's validity, citing the morphology of Brazilian spinosaurids Irritata and Angatrona, and suggesting they may have been transitionary forms between the earlier Beryonychins and the later Spinosaurins. The authors said with further research, Beryonychina may be found to be a paraphyletic and natural grouping. Ichthyovenator's Spinosaurin classification was supported by Thomas Arden and colleagues in 2018, who resolved it as a basal member of the group due to its tall dorsal sail. Their cladogram can be seen below. Brace yourself for a deep dive into paleobiology as we explore its impact and relevance in our evolving narrative. Though no skull remains have been found for Ichthyovenator, all known spinosaurids had elongated, low, narrow snouts that allowed them to reach far for food and to quickly close their jaws in a manner similar to modern crocodilians. The tips of spinosaurids' upper and lower jaws fanned out into a rosette-like shape that bore long teeth, behind which there was a notch in the upper jaw. This formed a natural trap for prey. Like those of other spinosaurids, Ichthyovenator's straight, unserrate teeth would have been suitable for impaling and capturing small animals and aquatic prey. This type of jaw and tooth morphology, which is also observed in today's gharials and other fish-eating predators, has led many paleontologists to believe spinosaurids were largely piscivorous as implied by Ichthyovenator's name. This is also evidenced by the discovery of shensteer fish scales in the stomach cavity of one Beryonyx skeleton and a Spinosaurus snout that was found with a vertebra from the scrunchid fish Onchoprisis embedded in it. A more generalist diet has also been proposed for spinosaurs, based on fossils such as the bones of a juvenile iguanodonted that was also found in the same Beryonyx specimen, an irritata tooth embedded in the vertebrae of a pterosaur, and tooth crowns from spinosaurid that were found in association with sauropod dinosaur bones. It is thus likely that spinosaurids were also scavengers or hunters of larger prey. Though no limb bones are known from Ichthyovenator, all known spinosaurids had well-built arms with enlarged thumb claws, which they likely used to hunt and process prey. Many possible functions, including thermogulation and energy storage, have been proposed for spinosaurid sails. In 2012, Allain and colleagues suggested considering the high diversity in neural spine elongation observed in theropod dinosaurs, as well as histological research done on the sails of synapsids stem mammals. Ichthyovenator's sinusoidal sail may have been used for courtship display or for recognizing members of its own species. In a 2013 blog post, Nash considered the latter function unlikely, favoring the hypothesis of sexual selection for Ichthyovenator's sail because it appears to have evolved on its own, without very close relatives. Nash also notes that it is possible similar relatives have not yet been discovered. Spinosaurids appear to have had semi-aquatic lifestyles, spending much of their time near or in water, which has been inferred by the high density of their limb bones that would have made them less buoyant, and the oxygen isotope ratios of their teeth being closer to those of remains from aquatic animals like turtles, crocodilians, and hippopotamuses than those of other, more terrestrial theropods. Semi-aquatic adaptations seem to have been more developed in spinosaurids than baryonychians. Arden and colleagues in 2018 suggested the shortness of Ichthyovenator's pubis and ischium relative to its ilium, coupled with the elongation of the neural spines in the tails of early spinosaurids, are indications that spinosaurids may have progressively made more use of their tails to propel themselves underwater as they grew more adapted to an aquatic lifestyle. A similar, though more extreme, shrinkage of the pelvic girdle and elongation of the tail's neural spines, creating a paddle-like structure, was observed in Spinosaurus, which appears to have been more aquatic than any other known non-avian or non-bird dinosaur. With that being said, let's now move on to palaeontology and palaeobiography. Ichthyovenator is known from the Barremian to Cenomanian Grès supérieurs formation, and was found in a layer probably dating to the Aptian stage of the Early Cretaceous period between 125 and 113 million years ago. It coexisted with other dinosaurs such as the sauropod Tanveorus and an indeterminate sauropod, Iguanodontian, and Nuceratopsian. Tracks of theropod, sauropod, and ornithopod dinosaurs, as well as plant remains, are also known from the formation. Fossils of non-dinosaurian fauna are represented by ray-finned fish like lankengites and lepidotes, as well as turtles including shekemes, xingiancheles, and an indeterminate keratichelid and trinechid. The tridoniid bivalves Trigonioides and Picotownio have also been recovered from the formation. The Grès supérieurs formation is the lateral equivalent of the neighboring Cockcroot and Phu Phan formations in Thailand. From the Cockcroot formation, fossils of theropods including spinosaurids, sauropods, iguanodontians, and freshwater fish have also been recovered. In 2010, Stephen L. Brusett and colleagues noted the discovery of spinosaurids in Asia, a family previously known only from Europe, Africa, and South America, suggests there was faunal interchange between the supercontinents Laurasia in the north and Gondwana in the south during the early-late Cretaceous. It may also be possible spinosaurids already had a cosmopolitan distribution before the Middle Cretaceous preceding the breakup of Laurasia from Gondwana, but the authors noted more evidence is needed to test this hypothesis. In 2012, Allain and colleagues suggested such a global distribution may have occurred earlier across Pangaea before the late Jurassic, even if Asia was the first landmass to be separated during the breakup of the supercontinent. In 2019, Elisabeth Lefebvre and colleagues also indicated a complex geographical pattern for spinosaurs during the early Cretaceous based on anatomical similarities between Ichthyovenator and the European genus Valibinovenatrix. Thanks for being a part of this amazing journey. I can't wait to bring you more exciting content.